Hey everyone, Pastor Nathan here. We're continuing our series on Tuesdays, supplementing our Sunday morning series, Back to Basics, A Firm Foundation. We're looking at some of the in-between stories between the major narratives that we are tackling on Sundays. This last Sunday we talked about Joseph, and then this next Sunday we're talking about Moses. In between those two, the end of the book of Genesis and the second chapter of Exodus, you get chapter 1 of Exodus. Chapter 1 of Exodus is interesting for a couple reasons. One is the pharaohs that knew Joseph, that knew the children of Israel. We see that, at least from the text here, that a new generation rose up that didn't know this narrative or didn't care about this narrative, and they were more concerned about the reality of this growing population, this growing people group within the Egyptian borders. These are the Hebrews. God is doing exactly what he said he was going to do for Abraham's offspring, for the generations coming after Abraham. He was going to bless them and make them into a great nation. And one of the ways that works is they become very powerful. There's a lot of Hebrews in the land of Egypt. Some estimates, by the time the people of Israel leave the land of Egypt, we're talking 1.2 million people leaving that land. This is a huge group of people who are now inhabiting Egypt, but who are not Egyptian. And so the Egyptian leaders, particularly the Pharaoh, begin to get really worried about this. So they start enslaving God's people. They make them do hard service. But God continues to bless his people because despite Pharaoh's intentions, God's covenantal promises continue to move forward. God continues to bless and strengthen and prosper his people, even in those hard circumstances. God's covenantal promises don't stop just because our outward circumstances aren't great. God's promises for his people remain intact because of his word of promise, not necessarily because of our outward circumstances. So that's kind of point one in this section. God continues to bless and to be faithful to his covenant, even in the midst of these challenging circumstances in Exodus chapter 1. But then we also get to the second thing, that we get these two ladies, these midwives, Hebrew midwives. These are Shiphrah and Puah. Now, Shiphrah and Puah are put in a really tough spot by Pharaoh. Pharaoh tells these ladies, as the next kind of measure to try to control the Hebrew population, he tells these ladies, says, look, if you're going to these Hebrew ladies and they have a girl, allow the girl to live. But if they have a boy, I want you to murder that child. Now you think about that for a second. The supreme ruler of the land has given you a direct order that is contradictory to what you know is right and true. These midwives are so brave. They continue to do exactly what they need to do, what they're supposed to do. And the boys continue to be born, the girls continue to be born, and Pharaoh gets wind of this. He says, what's going on here? And so he brings Shiphrah and Puah back into his presence. He says, ladies, I told you to do this. Why are you not? It'd be really easy for us to interpret what these ladies say as they're lying or they're covering up or they're exaggerating circumstances. But nothing in the text tells us this. This is chapter 1, verse 18 and 19, where they say, look, Pharaoh, we're trying to get there in time, but the Hebrew ladies are just really strong, vigorous. They're giving birth before we arrive and can do anything. So these kids are already born, and they're already being protected and taken care of by their families. And Pharaoh doesn't push that point. But what we do see is that these ladies are being honest. They're being faithful to their God. They fear God more than they fear Pharaoh. And they go about doing exactly what they know needs to be done as a reflection of God in this world. And God rewards them for it. In fact, a few verses later on, what they'll say is verse 21, and because the midwives feared God, he gave them families. And God continues not just to give these ones families, but also to expand the people of Israel into that 1+ million folks by the time Moses comes back to set them free at God's command. So what's incredible about this is how this continues to be a challenge for us today, that we have a culture that says do X, do this, live this way, think these thoughts. Challenge within that is to fear God more than we fear anything else. But then the other side of that is to respond with truth, humility, gentleness, and grace. And when we do that, then that's where we're reflecting God too, in how we respond when we know what is right and we follow what is right in the midst of a world that doesn't want us to do what is right, in a world that's frankly full of darkness. So anyhow, I hope this is helpful for you and encouraging to you that God is faithful to his covenantal promises even when all outward circumstances seem to indicate the other, and that in the midst of those challenging circumstances, it is better to fear God and then to speak the truth in love with gentleness and grace as we respond to the world around us and shine the light of God's love in a sin-darkened world. I hope that's helpful for you today. Well, take care, and we'll talk again soon.